You also, I believe, were impressed with the transparency of AT&T, and I was just wondering if at the time when you were there, if any reference was ever made to Arthur Page and his values and integrity, and if it was just the culture of AT&T and T and your influence and Page, just because you had the same ethical standards, that kind of a business attitude just has continued.
I don't think my memory at age past 87 isn't that good, but I don't think I remember ever hearing Arthur Page's name mentioned in all the years I was there. It might have been, but I don't remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I do remember this was really, remember, my first corporate exposure. And I was struck, that was where I got my education in business ethics, and I'll tell you a little about it. Uh, one day, one of the chairmen or the president, I don't remember who, asked me if I would help out some young fellow down in the PR department who was having some problem that I was happened to be familiar with. My my relationship with AT&T didn't depend on my relationship with this young man. It depended on my relationship at the top. But I went down and I met this fellow. I mean, I liked him and I helped him with the problem. He was 25 years old. He was not experienced. And I really hit it up with the fellow. I liked him. So at Christmas time, I sent him, as a nice gesture, a year subscription to the National Geographic magazine, which at that time was $17 for the year. Well, I just meant it out of goodwill. I wasn't going to get anything from this fellow. But a couple of weeks later, I get a letter from him saying that he had received a notice of the gift. And he said, AT&T has a policy prohibiting us from receiving any gifts from anyone with whom we do business. So would I please cancel the subscription and send him a letter to the copy of my letter canceling it for the file for the record. Well, that was the way the ethics of the AT&T company was. That's how careful they were. And in the early 50s, somewhere around then, maybe the mid 50s, there was a journalist who in later years, incredibly enough, became a friend of mine, Joseph Goulden, who wrote a book called Monopoly about AT&T, attacking AT&T as a monopoly and all the terrible things he did. It did. But in the whole book, there was only one or two petty little nothings of corruption, which really were. But they were out of 1 million employees, he could only find a couple of little nothings. And that said something about the character of the corporation. What I think, to me, the significance of Arthur Page, which certainly influenced my whole life, was that what he said was that a corporation's reputation comes from 90% of what it does and 10% of what it says. And he said if there's a disparity between the two, it's the 90% that counts, not the 10%. Well, the sad thing to me that's happened in public relations, by and large, with exception, honorable exception, is that public relations people think of themselves primarily as communicators. And they're very skilled at it. They know how to communicate a message. But that's the 10%. I never had, never, Cindy, I never had any involvement in publicity of any kind. We never, even in my firm in later years, we haven't talked about that. But we never had anything to do with publicity. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying we didn't have that experience. We never wrote a speech. We never wrote a news release. What we were involved in was what we hoped would be the 90%. That is to say, what was the policy of the company in the first place, and did it deserve public support? Now, I think that public relations today ignores too often ignores the 90% and pays attention just to the 10% of saying it. For example, in the Enron scandals, it turned out the public relations people, they might have been good communicators. They weren't involved in any of the decisions. They had nothing to do with the decision. In the case of Walmart, which is a company that I have to say I admire a great deal, I don't know what part the public relations firm is playing in any of this or all of this, but I think the significant thing about Walmart trying to change its reputation is the changes in the policies they're doing, the changes in the things they're doing, not in what they're saying, they don't say very much, but in the way they're treating their employees, and many healthcare policies and so on and so on. I think that's good public relations, and I think that's the off the page idea.